Hello, welcome back. So yesterday, alongside the new HomePod mini colors and the redesigned AirPods, Apple released some pretty insane computers, along with the silicon that'll power them and who knows what other computers in the future. Starting with the chips that they announced, we have now the M1 Pro and the M1 Max. I really like the naming convention of having M1, then M1 Pro, and then M1 Max being the highest performant model. This will be really easy for people to understand since the naming convention is similar to the iPhone. So starting with M1 Pro, you can get up to 10 CPU cores and 16 GPU cores with up to 32 gigabytes of unified memory that has a bandwidth of 200 gigabytes per second. And the M1 Max has 10 CPU cores with up to 32 GPU cores and 64 gigabytes of unified memory that has a bandwidth of 400 gigabytes per second. And having the chips share memory between the CPU and the GPU is just gonna help save time and performance since they're not going to have to worry about copying data between the two individual memory banks. Also, both chips will get a 16-core neural engine that's just going to help with machine learning performance. And along with that, you also have an on-chip display engine, which in the M1 Pro will drive up to 2 external monitors, and on the M1 Max, it'll drive up to 4 external monitors. So the M1 Pro and the M1 Max will be able to encode and decode different video codecs like H.264, HEVC, and most impressively, ProRes. Since these are Pro models, there's also on-chip media engines, which will allow for up to 20 streams of 4K ProRes on the M1 Pro, and up to 7 streams of 8K ProRes on the M1 Max. And they even go to point out that this is better performance than the Mac Pro's Afterburner card, which is pretty impressive given that that card was designed with just the intent of encoding media.
That's more streams than on a 28-core Mac Pro with Afterburner.
And not only are these new processors fast, what really makes M1 and Apple Silicon stand out is how efficient they are.
Industry-leading performance per watt.
According to Apple's graphics, M1 Pro and Max both deliver 1.7 times the CPU performance of other 8-core PCs while consuming 70% less power. But actual data on how they perform in real scenarios is going to have to wait till next week when people actually start getting them. Also, a spec that really helped just put the scale of these chips in perspective is the number of transistors that each one has. So the original M1 had 16 billion transistors, and M1 Pro more than doubles that with 33.7 billion. And then you have M1 Max that just kicks it up another notch to 57 billion transistors. Now keep in mind though, this size includes everything on the chip, so the CPU, the GPU, the neural engine, the display engine, the media engine, everything else they have on there. So it's not just the CPU. But just for fun though, this is how many transistors are in other chips that are out on the market right now. So the new 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros are pretty much redesigned, and I really like it. They're more squared off, they're less tapered, and they're just a little more boxy feeling that reminds me a lot of the older MacBooks. So starting with the keyboard, the whole well is now black anodized, and they got rid of the touch bar in place of full-size function keys. And I know the touch bar is pretty polarizing. Some people hated it. A lot of people hated it. Some people liked it. I think I'll personally miss it. You can check out my video here about how I used it to create shortcuts using Automator. There's also a 6-speaker sound system that's supposed to give you spatial audio, along with 3 studio quality mics. Now, MacBooks in the past have already had really good quality audio with their speakers and their microphones, so I'm really excited to see how this new design can improve upon that. Or rather, hear how the new design can improve upon that. Now, I think the more exciting update though is the display. So they shrunk the bezels down, which helps fit that 14-inch screen in the smaller model, but this did end up leaving a notch at the top where they have the webcam. And speaking of the camera, it's now doubled to a resolution of 1080p with a wider aperture, which is going to help with a lot of low light performance. So hopefully those Zoom calls are going to start looking better on MacBooks. And as for the notch, I don't really mind that it's there as long as it's not below the status bar, as long as it's either flush or stays within it. But I do wish the notch had Face ID hardware in it, and I think they would have been able to justify a little bit more with that. I'm interested in seeing on the 14-inch display, how much does the notch really feel like it takes up? And for the screen, I think it's going to be fantastic. It's now a Liquid Retina XDR display with ProMotion, just like the M1 iPad Pro. So it's now a mini LED adaptive refresh display, so you can view and edit HDR content on the screen of your MacBook, along with it refreshing up to 120 Hertz. So it can either match your content, it can match what you're scrolling at or the actions that you're doing. And if you're editing video, you can also lock off the frame rate on the MacBook so it'll match the video that you're working on. And I'm super excited to see this display on a MacBook since I've been really enjoying the high refresh rate on the 13 Pro. Also on these laptops, you now have ports. On the right side, you have HDMI, USB-C, and an SD card reader. And on the other side, you have a high impedance headphone jack, which should be really good for those studio quality headphones. You have 2 more USB-C ports and MagSafe 3. Also with MagSafe 3, you get some pretty incredible fast charging. So you can go from 0 to 50% in just 30 minutes. And just in case you forget your MagSafe cable, you can also charge via the other USB-C ports. I can't wait to try out these new computers. I think I'm most excited about the new display and just the raw power that we're gonna see on the new M1 chips. Let me know down in the comments what you're most excited about. But thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos about tech, cameras, and making. Here's a video about iOS 15, and here's a video that YouTube thinks you're gonna like the best.